We're going to try to get started so that I can get you out of here at a reasonable hour. I really appreciate the crowd. I guess power advertising works, so I'm glad to see the crowd so big. I'm going to start you off today just to try to lighten the mood and set the tone a little bit with a little song. So. I'm not necessarily going to sing it. Turn the volume up a little, Mike. Sorry for the entertainment there, but hopefully you knew that was Gnarls Barkley and his hit song Crazy. A couple of the lyrics in there were, number one, I remember when I lost my mind, and second, does that make me crazy? And hopefully after tonight's presentation, you won't think he wrote that song about me. Okay, let's start with a little philosophy today. Okay, here's a quote. Attributed to many. If you're not moving forward, you're losing ground. You know, while change is not always welcome or viewed as positive initially, I hope that today I can prove that if it's done properly, it benefits the community. Next. My PowerPoint expert is sleeping on the job. All right. I want to try to give you a local example of that philosophy. Okay, that's their interpretation of beautifying the lakefront. I've told a lot of people I don't understand how you take a baseball field with grass and make it a parking lot, and that beautifies the area. That was a quote by Whiting High School baseball coach Kevin Lenz in the Northwest Indiana Times. That, of course, was before he had a chance to play at Oil City Stadium. And if you don't think that quote provides inspiration for me, you can visit my office and check the wall. Some more philosophy. One way to keep momentum going is to have greater or constantly greater goals. That's by Michael Corda, who's an author and publisher. I feel we currently have the momentum and we need to continue to push the envelope. That's my philosophy. Number three, doesn't matter how slowly you go, as long as you do not stop. Confucius says. I hope by sharing that quote today with you that you forgive me for how long it actually takes to institute change. Because God knows it takes time. Last philosophy for today, and everybody knows this one is the definition of insanity. Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting different results, and that's, of course, Albert Einstein. And as you'll hear today, I may not have all the answers or 100% of the details in every project, but it's about time that we take some risks and start changing some things that we've been doing over the years. Okay. I want to give you a definition of the word controversial. You're going to hear that word or see that word through my presentation several times today. You know, controversial is something that can be viewed, something can be viewed as controversial if it impacts a person's employment, their salary or income, or in other words, costs you some money. It impacts your home or property, your quality of life, your philosophical beliefs, or really any change that does not have unanimous support, which is pretty difficult to have. Okay, with that, the agenda today includes a full slate of interesting but controversial topics. Okay. Usually, you know, I come up here, I could talk, I enjoy this, I have a blast. I really do thoroughly enjoy it. But today, it's going to be much more difficult for me today because, you know, we're in the process of making several decisions. that impact a lot of people's lives. You know, that's really hard to do. For those of you who haven't attended one of my forums in the past, I'll give you a quick review. I'm going to run through a presentation. Not a lot of graphics, a lot of talking by me. I apologize for that. At the end of the day, I hope you would hold your questions till the end of the presentation. But at the end of the presentation, I'll take as long as it takes and stay as long as anybody needs me to answer or get their questions answered. Okay, so here's the agenda. I'm going to talk briefly about a funding plan overview, the community center and a potential YMCA project, a stadium district plan rollout, a new concept for a lakefront hotel, water and sewer rates, residential matching assistance grants, the quiet zone or whistle ban on the lakefront, and a handful of miscellaneous projects. Okay, I'm going to start with a funding overview. I wanted to put this up front because I think it has an important context to the information that I'm going to present later on in the presentation. You know, today we have an extremely unusual and very complex financial situation in the city. Our assessed valuation of property tax value is expected to grow significantly in the coming years. The growth will be short-lived and drop back down slightly to where a little bit above where it is today. Okay. My goal, and the goal of all our financial advisors, is to capture the maximum opportunity for the city. We've made a decision to capture all that new growth or all that new property tax value in our TIF district. Well, there's not enough time really to discuss the specifics of that strategy. I can guarantee that it's the best way to capture the biggest benefit for the community. Some important factors about the funding plan. Okay, we don't know the specifics today. Okay, we have a great deal of information, but the final numbers and the final specifics are not available to us yet. We have a conference call at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning, which should shed some light on that. All the money in that TIF district needs to be spent on capital projects. In other words, you can't fund operating expenses, salaries, benefits, utilities, anything outside of capital projects. And one of the most important factors is that all that debt that we take in the TIF district is going to be repaid by our industrial taxpayers, meaning nothing comes out of the residential taxpayers' pocket. Okay, with that said, knowing that we have a funding plan, there's some good things happening. Okay, we're hoping that many of the projects on our current plan and some of the things I'll talk to you about today will be able to be funded in the short term versus, say, waiting as the money comes in and paying as you go. Because the funds are limited, my hardest decision is going to be what projects make the cut, what benefits the community the most, and where they use the money wisely. Okay, I thought a brief overview of the funding plan was going to clarify a few things. Number one, there is going to be capital money available. Number two, we will take on new debt. I'm going to add a little bit here. Okay, recently in the Times, there's been a lot of press about communities with their debt. Okay, first of all, a town the size of Whiting is never going to be very good on debt when you measure it per capita. But we may be the only city in the state, possibly even the country, that has a unique situation like we have. There's not a lot of communities out there that have industrial taxpayers like we do. There's not a lot of communities in the state and the country that have industrial taxpayers who are great partners like we have. And a lot of these projects went to help our industrial taxpayers, and that's why our debt, we've taken debt out and issued bonds. And again, one of the most important factors is they are the ones that are paying the debt service back. It's not the property taxpayers, it's the industrial property, or residential property taxpayers, the industrial property taxpayers. I wasn't really expecting to make some announcements today about some specific projects, saying we got a green light and moving forward, but until that conference call tomorrow morning, and I understand the finances specifically, I'm going to hold off and be a little bit more cautious today, so I'm going to talk about, I hope, things will happen instead of they will happen today. Okay, the first item on the agenda is what I'm going to call controversial topic number one. I added this slide late in the day, and I think I kind of screwed up my presentation a little bit, but I'm going to jump into it. We have an opportunity for the Whiting Community Center, but before I get into that, I want to talk a little bit about the history of the community center. everybody here, especially some of the old timers like me, grew up in this building. There's no doubt there's a ton of history and a ton of sentimental value placed in this building. It's always been, and it currently is, an important part of our community. That's why we've worked so hard to maintain it. And again, I fought for years, and like many of the mayors before me, to maintain the building and to keep investing in the building so that we don't end up with a white elephant on our hands. Okay, but without a doubt, and I think people will know this, it is an absolute huge drain on our budget. So the background, okay, the community center right now, we spend $750,000 each year to operate this facility and expenses. We only raise $250,000 a year through revenue, through memberships, fees, vending, whatever else, bowling fees, whatever we could bring in. Do the math, it's $500,000 a year, and I'm being very kind. Okay, a year in annual loss. None of the expected capital money I talked to you in the first phase, or first slides, can be used to help support the facility. The loss was much, much greater than previous years. And every year we've continued to make progress, but it's very difficult to take a facility like this that wasn't built for the municipal use and to actually get it close to making profit. We've installed the windows, energy efficiency improvements, we made some staffing changes, and we also bumped our fees to increase revenue. So we've made some progress. If I had to guess, we're closer to $700,000 annual loss as little as 3 years back. Okay, so now you ask, well, why is the subsidy so large? And let me stop there for a second. You know, most park and recreation programs are subsidized by the city. Very few park and recreation programs make a profit, and they're not intended to. Park and recreation amenities are part of the services that municipalities get. But not everybody has a 90-year-old building that wasn't meant to be operated by a municipality like we do. Okay, so the subsidy is really so large because, number one, we inherited this building in 1973. Brief history lesson, I believe it was Mayor Herringody at the time. The refinery comes to Mayor Herringody and says, well, we're going to close the building and we're going to tear it down. Unless you want it. You know, not that time. He had no budget to support this building. But basically he was forced, like any mayor in his position would have done, to say, sure, I'll take it. So basically he inherited this operation and all the labor and all the utilities and all the costs associated with this building because he had no other choice. And of course, you don't inherit a budget to support it to go along with it. Another reason the subsidy is so large is it's really difficult for municipalities to make a profit. There's laws that actually prevent us from doing so. In other words, it's just difficult to charge market rates and to operate the facility like a commercial entity would. And it's always more difficult politically for municipalities to raise rates and reduce staff. And that shouldn't be a secret to anybody. You know, politicians never want us to charge the people who vote for you more money. And it's just true. And I've tried to inch that up and try to find a balance, but it's not a great solution. And lastly, we always had a surplus of funds that we can funnel into the operation to subsidize it and to kind of offset the cost of operation. With the tax caps, that's a totally different dynamic today. Okay, there is no surplus of funds. Okay, there's no other flexibility. In 2005 and 2006, there was a study, the Maximus Good Government study. You probably remember the paper flashing with the news about that study for a long period of time. The one recommendation that sticks in my mind today, and probably one of the only recommendations that we haven't followed to date, was that study recommended that we immediately sell this building. Instead of investing the property immediately, we at least got to the table and said, what can we do? This is kind of the trigger that made us look at the operation and say, how can we improve? What can we do? How can we change things? We formed an internal task force. We met several times to discuss, okay, what's the best options? Had a whole list of things that we could do, and we tried, and we accomplished a lot of them. We also commissioned an IU SPIA, or School of Public and Environmental Affairs, study to actually come in, review the operations, and make some recommendations to us. In general, their study came back and said, this is the perfect building to privatize as a private commercial health club. And when you look at that, say it makes sense, right? You got a swimming pool, you got 2 gymnasiums, you got fitness area. It's really a health center. There's some problems with that, though, right? The first problem was, under that operation, all the seniors and all the kids are gone. Okay? So now we're left with trying to find solutions for the seniors and for the youth. Well, it's a solution. It really wasn't the best solution. From an economics perspective, it was right out. And the other thing, and this may be the most important, is that if that commercial entity failed, it would be really, really difficult, maybe even impossible, for the city to then come back in and change it back to the community center operation. Because everybody would have been displaced, all the employees would have been gone, the operation would have been totally different, there'd be no fitness equipment here, or that we would own, we'd have to buy everything new, it would be a nightmare. We'd be scrambling to try to put it back in place. We also reviewed and studied other options, which include, let's just try to make our operation better. What can we do to make our operation better? Streamline the whole existing operation. Privatize it to a non-health club operation. Commercialize it, open it up for storage or something like that. Or we actually looked at the sale of the building also. What we came up with is the ideal solution for this building would be to continue to provide the community-minded programming that today's operation provides, continue to serve all the age groups, the seniors, the youth, the young adults, people my age, old folks like me, allow the city to still maintain ownership of the building. It's critical that this is a gem. We want to maintain ownership. We want to still have it under our control. But we certainly want to reduce or eliminate the $500,000 annual subsidy. I'll do a little quick math before I get to the last one. It's my 10th year as mayor. I wake up at night sometimes sweating, thinking that there's over $5 million lost in this building due to the subsidy. Now, it wasn't lost. It was invested into the community, but you know, that's a lot of money that could have been used for other projects. And most very important is to allow for an exit strategy. Whatever plan you come up with, you have to be able to have to be able to turn operations ahead. The only option that provided all of these benefits was a proposal that the YMCA and the city are working on right now. What the YMCA proposal entails is for the city to lease the facility to the entire building, entire operation to the YMCA for $1 a year. Okay? The YMCA will then be responsible for 100% of all the operating costs, including staff, insurance, utilities, regular maintenance. The YMCA will have complete control of the operation, and they'll get to set their own rates. We may ask how they can do that. We can't, and I'll try to explain that. Okay. Under the YMCA proposal, the benefits include an immediate savings of $500,000, continued and improved, and I emphasize improved because they are experts in what they do, and they can do things that we're not capable of or can't afford to do. And it's the programming I'm talking about. And the new operation is much improved over today because of their expertise, new renovations that I'll talk about, new equipment, additional programming, and they also offer things like childcare that we can. Other benefits, the city will still be able to use the facility and continue to use it as a public shelter for emergencies and for public events. The building will also remain under our control and will basically serve as the tenant or the landlord. It will basically be a landlord renting to the YMCA. Just like your landlord would at home if you rented an apartment from them, we'll be responsible for the primary mechanical and structural components of the building. Furnaces, the roof, the walls, the outside exterior of the building, those things. And this is an important factor that in today's world, that only the people who use the facility will pay. I don't know how many times I can tell you that people come up to me and say, don't spend any money over there, I don't use that facility. Well, in the municipal world, there's a structure called fee for service. And if you don't use that service, you shouldn't necessarily be required to pay for it. So basically, it's one of the strong points of the plan. Some other important factors. Under the YMCA proposal, all the displaced employees will have a program set up for them, and then have multiple options. Several will be able to bid and transfer to other open positions with intention. What happened? I didn't touch it. Must be a controversial point. We've intentionally held open positions over the last 6 months or 7 months that have become open, so that and didn't fill them because of anticipation of this project. We'll also be offering early retirement. Every one of them, if possible, will be able to interview at the Y. So there's a possibility that their employees now can just move over to a new job, new opportunity. And we'll include a severance payment to everybody. Okay, in other words, based on your service, based on your salary, we're going to allow people to have some money to walk away and be able to cover themselves for a short period of time, where in case they need help until they find another job, there'll be somebody available. Another thing, factor about the project is that the city will invest to renovate the entire lower facility, level of the building, and complete the lobby restoration as initially planned. I'll emphasize the building is still ours. So we're going to invest in the building so that the building is still here and is still in great shape, and it'll be continued to be used for years. This project would have happened regardless of whatever option we picked. Because the second best option was for us to keep ownership and try to maintain it and try to improve the operation. So we definitely want to make those changes so we can increase revenue and add some money to the bottom line. If you get a chance later on, we have a drawing up here of what the proposed new lower floor would be and what it would look like. Okay, and also I think it's very important, and I think all of us Center's here, Center was kind enough to make a large donation to the renovation of the lobby. Okay, that renovation is going to continue and go on as planned. We have several grants and several donations to do that. And we're going to continue with the restoration project in the same mode, in the same way that we intended, that we started and we advertised. Okay, some more factors in the project. At least 4 of the bowling lanes will be removed. That's the 4 new bowling lanes that were removed on the back. I believe it's lanes 9, 10, 11, and 12. There is an option being reviewed right now to remove all 12 bowling lanes, and this drawing depicts all 12 being removed. But that project is totally funding dependent, and depending on the funding plan, if the funds are available, that may or may not happen. That, of course, created some issues for us for the bowling leagues for this year. And bowling in the community center, we plan on bowling in the community center this year. Letters were sent out to both league secretaries that the leagues will not be available, or the leagues will not be available for leagues this year. I know that was it was bad news on my part, or timing was poor on my part, because we didn't think things would move this fast. So I offered it to help subsidize their move, and I offered each of the leagues a $1,000 grant to help them with their troubles of moving to another league and get everything set up and make all those changes. Okay, it's just, again, it's just unfortunate how the timing worked out, but there's simply no way we could, after you see the timeline on the next slide, continue to operate the bowling. Next 2 slides. I think it's also important to tell everybody, or at least emphasize, that the YMCA is an extremely reputable organization. They have funding avenues that we don't, and they're simply not available to us. Their pockets are much, much deeper than ours. And they already have a proven record in Northwest Indiana. If we proceed with this, here's the timetable. We currently have a signed MOU, or Memorandum of Understanding. And what an MOU does is basically outlines some very general, high-level points of an agreement. It's not a binding document. It just says, we're both very interested, here's some general terms. The next step would be to finalize a lease. The lease is the document that actually sets the ball rolling. The lease will determine who maintains what the rents are, all the details, just like a lease that you sign to a Employee bidding and transfer will happen by the end of the year. December 31st will be the last day for employees, for any community center employee, not barring the transfer to another job. We anticipate closing the building on January 1st of 2014 to begin the construction. The reason we're closing the building is that there's an opportunity to save a lot of money on top of the construction costs if the building's closed completely and the construction workers can work freely. The other option was to try to stage it, instead of barricades and buffers, and let some people come in the building and some people not come into the building and do things. That takes much longer and adds to the cost. Those costs are anywhere from $75,000 to a couple $100,000. If everything goes as planned, the construction will happen somewhere between January and, let's say, as late as June. And then it'll reopen under YMCA control sometime in June or July. If for some reason we can't come to terms with the exact lease of the YMCA, with the YMCA, we'll reopen the building under city control. Okay, simply put, when you look at all the options, this is the best business decision. It's not always the best sentimental decision, but it definitely is the best business decision. And I know not everyone will agree with it, but as mayor, we just can't continue to operate this facility the way like we've been doing for years. Okay. That was controversial project number one. Let me take a breath. Okay. We've worked for a lot of years, a lot of months on that. There's been a lot of conversation. I'm sure there's questions on that, so hopefully I can take them up at the tail end. Okay, we'll move on to controversial project number two. The state industry plan. I hope you had a chance today, if you haven't, to review the graphic to my left, which is, in my left or right, which is a conceptual view of the stadium district. This project will provide some needed infrastructure for future BP investment. It will also provide some needed attractions to turn Whiting into a destination place. It will also provide new diverse residential opportunities that I'll talk about a little bit more in a minute, and provide several new commercial opportunities. And also, since it's proximity to the park, it will serve as a new gateway to the lakefront park. Well, there's still a bunch of moving parts. Here's some highlights of the plan. Okay, the project will include all the properties east of the Schraub Avenue alley by Standard Diamonds. So everything east of Standard Diamonds, north of 121st Street, is included in this plan. It includes all of Old Standard Avenue. When I say old, it's the residential portion of Standard Avenue. All of Old Center Street, which means none of the new homes. All of 119th Street and all of Front Street. Over 75 properties will need to be acquired by the city. I'll talk a little bit more about that later. The proposed plan is market driven, and I'll cover that again later on the slide too. But it includes, again, a variety of residential units, new commercial multi-use buildings, a senior citizen market rate apartment buildings, multiple new restaurants, eateries, entertainment venues such as museums and sports facilities, a large allotted area for new BP development, road closures and new roadways, Oil City Stadium additions, and hundreds of new parking spaces. The moving parts are really the entertainment components of the plan. And those are, number one, the museums. We've been pushing to get a museum in town for quite some time. It's been delayed because of finances. We are very, very hopeful that the funding plan I spoke about earlier will be able to finance the museum. Now, if you're a mayor in any city in the state, most mayors are saying, I don't really want to build a museum. I don't want to really take care of it. Okay? But we have a very interesting and unique situation. We have a very wealthy and willing partner in the refinery. Our museum will become, a large portion of the museum will become the history of the Standard Oil Company. There is no location in the country or the world that has any of the memoirs or artifacts from Standard Oil and Amoco. When BP took over, they basically, all of that history disappeared. There is some willingness to have our museum, if we build it, become the home to all those artifacts. So slightly different than some small communities' museum. We also have a commitment to consider any funding requests that we put before them, which means they will partner with us financially. And two other really cool things are in the works that are happening with us that we hope we'll be able to pull off. First, we've been in discussions for almost a year with a group called the Chicago Baseball Museum. I've talked about other forums, I know you've heard that before. But that project and those negotiations have gone as far as I would, if I gave you a number, I'd give you a very high percentage, but I feel very confident that if we build our museum, the Chicago Baseball Museum will be in the second wing, and they'll come here. That lends credibility to your operation instantly when you have a museum from the city of Chicago that's going to provide the history of all the Chicago sports baseball teams, Cubs, Sox, Negro League Baseball, women's baseball, 16-inch softball, all college baseball that occurs in the city. We also have an unbelievably cool project that has initially gave it about a 2% chance. Okay? Now it's moving fast enough to where a group is going to fly in to give us a proposal the first week of September. Okay, that's the National Mascot Hall of Fame. If you're looking to bring people in your community to support your businesses, the Chicago Baseball Museum, the history of the Standard Oil Company, and the National Mascot Hall of Fame, if that doesn't do it, I'd be pretty surprised. Okay? The National Mascot Hall of Fame is an amazing group that they're not as far advanced in their conceptual views and business plan as the Chicago Baseball Museum is, but they're picking strong momentum up. They actually would like to hold annual induction of mascots in downtown Whiting, including the mascot parade. So it's just, you know, we're famous for wacky stuff, that'll be wacky. And also, you know, this is going to sound like a pipe dream, but we have multiple, since we built Oil City Stadium, we've had multiple interests, or significant interests from multiple entities to come and put a minor league baseball team away. We didn't build the stadium for minor league baseball. We built it for our local teams, and that's why we did it. We never really thought about hosting minor league baseball. But minor league baseball brings an enormous amount of people in your community. And again, if you've ever read any of my strategies, any of my political campaign discussions, I feel it's very, very important to keep our business district strong, and that if our businesses don't survive, our community will crumble around it. So my goal and strategy has always been to bring traffic to your downtown business district so that they can survive and thrive and get more businesses building, more eateries, more restaurants, and there'll be plenty of people here to provide support. But along with all the things we've been doing, we've been getting not only the minor league baseball folks coming, and just for the record, minor league baseball owners are like these car salesmen. You shake your hand, you gotta count your fingers. You know, they're all trying to flee a previous city where they left a bunch of debt, and you know the situation didn't work out for them. So we've learned that. So we're looking for valid partners that are successful and are looking to expand their leagues, things like that. We're very happy with the Oilman right now. That's not a minor league team. They fit our stadium fine. A minor league team would take some investment. But we do have developers in town now that are talking to us that are renewing the push to bring a minor league team here, which would take another investment into the stadium to add more seats. But also, there's discussions now to put a two-sheet or two-rink ice arena. Now, it makes sense. To me, we would never think about that, we would never dream about that. Well, developers make sense because when you're investing money into a baseball stadium to improve the seating, and you have to add more parking, an ice arena is just another venue that can share the parking and share all the commercial entities that go along with the baseball stadium. So if you're a developer, it makes sense. If you're a mayor from Whiting, so you scratch your head. But it is a very viable option, and the people that are approaching us are very large developers in Chicago. Now, it's news, okay, but it's definitely very, very, for the press here, it's very early in the concept. So my intention of this was to show you that the stadium plan is widespread. There's a lot of legs, a lot of moving parts. And we may never elect to go with the ice arena, we never elect to go with the minor league baseball stadium, but there's value and people are coming here now willing to invest in the community. Also, there's a last option there. You know, any of you parents who have kids, young kids, and you take your kids to Belarus, okay, it's a children's activity center. Okay, that is part of the plan, that if there is room in this space, that's another way to bring people into your community. Again, that would have to be private development, public-private partnership. And again, it's just one of the concepts. Okay, it's not saying we're going to build it, it's a concept that we're looking at. All right, I want to get a little bit of market-based discussion because, you know, I come up here every forum and I say we're working with these guys, we're working with these guys, we're working with these guys. And there is some issues about development in Whiting. Well, there's extremely heavy developer interest. I mean, I can't tell you how many Saturdays I've been at City Hall meeting developers who come into town. There is a large problem with financing projects in our community. This small little town has no history of development financing. We have no history or market data to support any kind of condominium construction or the sales of those condominiums. We have no history to support higher rents than our market shows right now. Okay? We have the glut of condos in the Chicago market has just changed the entire financial operation for buildings. Okay, most financial institutions are demanding a 60+% pre-sale before you can build a building. Well, you know yourself, if you're going to build 24 buildings, you can't start the construction of the building until you sold 14 or 15 of them. Well, you know, the first few people on board are going to jump off board before you get to 15 sold. It's just really difficult to make that happen. It explains that without called the demise of the Village project, the developers that are going to build the building across from the stadium, they basically could, the financing situation and the market in Whiting actually caused so much confusion for them as early developers that they basically said, listen, I'm not ready for this right now. Okay, and well, the good news is there's multiple other people looking at it. It's just a very difficult project to get off the ground. We're hoping that the project on our far left there, which is the 1500 block of 119th Street, new apartment building, is going to act as the first domino, give us some history, and provide some proof to developers that a building can be successful in Whiting. Just briefly, that building is a 4-story, 1,000 square foot apartment building. Each apartment, I believe there's 12, time here, how many units? 24 units, and approximately $1,000 a month. So if you can afford to pay $1,000 rent, you definitely are somebody we want in our community. Okay, an important factor in these are things that I've learned through these processes, okay? All developers, and we have some developers in the room today, they use the financial markets for their financing. You know, there's a misconception here that big-time developers just pull the money out of their pocket and build a building. There may be a few that do that, but in reality they don't. Every project is built on a project-by-project basis. They go off and finance, get the best financing they can get from a private institution, and they build it. Okay, so if the private market will not lend money on a project because they don't feel it's credible, even that developer is going to say, well, it's not, I'm not interested in pursuing it. Now, there's some hybrid moves, they can put more money in their pocket, and things like that. But that fact makes it difficult to, you know, to actually establish financing for Whiting projects. So the market-driven economy will probably determine the final mix of all those buildings in the stadium district. Okay, whenever you try to acquire property, I'm well aware that I walk up to you and say, I need to buy your house, it may not be a welcome back. We will always be compassionate. There's also a lot of people calling me and saying, I want to sell my property. Okay, and I believe there's probably more of those right now than there is people that don't. When we do acquire properties, we'll always be compassionate, take great strides, and make sure the transaction is fair. If a property owner has been an asset to the city, I will do everything in my power to bend over backwards to help them and accommodate them. We will possibly trade them properties, we'll find them places to live, we hopefully will build a senior building first, that some of the seniors can move into the apartment building, and we'll make all that transaction work. But, if you're a property owner who's neglected your property for the last 20 years, hasn't put a dime into that property, and has negatively impacted our community, I'm coming after you with every tool in my bag, and I'm going to take that property as for the cheapest price I can get it, because that's in the best interest of the community. I won't allow those bad landlords, absentee landlords, or bad property owners to impede this project. All right, second breath. Hopefully nobody's in here that I can buy the property tomorrow. Moving on to controversial project number 3. They get less controversial as I go. Okay? The new hotel concept. You have heard me talk about this before. If we want to grow our tax base, if we want to be a successful destination, we have to have a hotel component in the community. As I stated in the past, the hotel needs to be our design to fit our community and not some developer's wishes and somebody jamming something down our throats. I have no interest in a Holiday Inn Express being popped up on the corner for $3 million trying to have somebody come in here and make a bunch of money just because we're doing some things in town. They're going to build what we want and what's best for our community. If it's done right, not only will the hotel provide a great resource for the community, but it'll be a significant benefit to our tax base. Okay, we've had discussions for months about where you put the hotel. Stadium District has a placeholder for it. Okay, but all of the big developers and all the people who are willing to make that investment, to make that hotel look and be what we want it to be, keep pointing back to Whiting Park. The most acceptable location is depicted on the layout on the table. If you haven't had a chance to get it, I have a 3D model of what the hotel would look like, where it would be, and it's actually an accurate scale to give you an idea how big the building would be, along with the other buildings that are in the park. Please look at that later on if you need some time. This concept is a $20 million investment. If you're mathematicians in the room or tax junkies, that's a $600,000 annual tax bill. The back of house operations would utilize the neglected area of the backside of the park where the tennis courts are that we don't currently use or don't have any plans for right now. In the coming months, we're going to be discussing this project with multiple developers to get multiple ideas and vet the project to make sure it's viable and try to move it downstream. At this point, I'm taking the stance that I support the location and I want to move the project forward so that we can get those details we need to be able to make the final decision. It's very difficult to make those decisions until you go down the process to find out all the specifics. The one thing is there will be a public process for this entire project. There's zoning changes, there's plan reviews, there's different meetings for different boards, so the people who want to provide input or get involved in the project will have an opportunity to do so. All right, controversial number 4. What is this? A small controversy. Small. Please, small. You know, to continue to improve our water and sewer infrastructure, we really need to look at raising additional revenue. I'll give you an example. We need to put a new water line in from Shrug Avenue to New York Avenue on 119th Street. Can't tear up 119th Street to disrupt the community, so we're going to find a way to put it through the alleys and make it happen. It's a $1 million investment. If you, in perspective, our entire revenue for the water department for the whole year, before I pay any expenses, is $550,000. So the revenue is just not there to continue capital improvements that we need to make. Rates have been flat for 13 years. We've been able to keep them flat because we've made considerable changes. We've streamlined the operation, and we're actually in very, very good standings, but the capital work cannot move forward without additional investment. So with that said, I'm going to request the City Council a small rate increase over the next few weeks. Brief overview is that a minimum usage customer will pay about $3 more per month. The average water customer in the city, and this is water and sewer, will pay $5 more a month. If you use more than the average, it'll be slightly higher tiered based on how much money you use, how much water you use. All right, somewhat controversial, project number 5. You know, we've been blessed being able to give residential matching assistance grants to our community. A lot of you in the room probably had a chance to use them. If you're from Robertsdale, I'm sorry, you're wedding residents. Okay. It's a little big for Mayor time there, you know. Put that across the whole Mayor time. But we've been flooded with calls over the last 6 months or so because we've been talking about trying to come up with another source of funds to reestablish the program. And once you start talking about it, people hear about it and say, well, I'm not going to do the work in my house if there's a grant coming in there, hold back. And people call, they want to know, you know. So there's been a lot of interest. Okay, we've actually had people come to meetings and try to make a stance, take a stance on why we should give them again. Okay, but at this point the answer is we're attempting to allocate some additional funds to provide one more grant program. And it's really key. Okay, on the next page I'll tell you why it's one more. Okay? There's absolutely no guarantees because that funding source again is dependent on how the financial plan comes out. Okay, but it will not happen earlier than early next year, for 2014. Here's some important points. I'm going to get this across to everybody so you understand how I'm thinking. Okay, in regards to management assistance, you know, when you give a grant to somebody to fix their homes up, those grants have to serve a broad base or a broad part of your community. They must focus on areas where it needs development. Okay, and the previous grants heavily geared toward the north side. They took advantage of them, but the central part of the community and south side of the community didn't participate as widely as they possibly could. There needs to be a fairly large sized pot to be able to pull a program like this off. Okay, and we had discussion, occasional argument, that, well, every time you get $20,000, just give it out as a grant. Well, we had almost 250 people apply for the grants last time. If I had $20,000 and we're giving away $3,000 or $6,000, I'd be sitting there trying to select 6 people out of 250 to give the grant to. It's a spot I don't want to be in. Okay? So there really has to be a large enough pot of money to be able to distribute them fairly and allow people who want to come in a decent number of people actually participate. And this is another important point. These grants are an extremely poor investment of using tax dollars. So in other words, with the property tax caps right now, our frozen levies, and all limitations on our budget, using tax dollars is basically saying, well, I'm going to lay out 2 caps, I'm going to give you a grant. It just doesn't make sense. So tax dollars just can't be used for projects like this. Okay, only one-time funds should be used. When I mean one-time funds, what we did last time, even though we were extremely tough time in the budget, we took the money that BP bought, that they paid us for sale of land for that, and instead of putting it in our own coffers and utilizing it to support our budget, we said this is one-time money and we can invest it back in the community by giving the grants. That was almost $1 million. Okay, that $1 million turned out to be almost $3 million of investment by the community back into their properties. Money well spent. I'd do it again in a second. But it's key to understand it was one-time money. And here's another famous white thing, right? You do a program one time, everybody thinks it's going to last forever. Every year, people are calling saying, hey, I want the grant again. You did it last year, it's my turn now. It's one time. This next time we do it, I don't foresee those grants happening on a large-scale basis for a long time. So, you know, it's very difficult money to be able to spend. There's actually statutes. It's littered across our operating statutes of state law, where we can't spend money for personal gain And those, a grant to somebody to improve their home is really personal gain. So there's tons and tons of limitations in us being able to come up with grant money. Here's another point that is brought up in some of the discussion we had from people saying we should open up the grants. We have roughly a $50,000 pot each year to where we allocate to the business district for commercial grants. And the argument was made, if you're giving to the businesses, we should get it first. Well, all the things that I discussed earlier, some things I'll probably explain later, is that we're looking to invest money for the broad-based good of the community. In the business district, you can make a sound argument that if the business district looks good, it improves itself, and property values go up in a business district, the whole community benefits. So I anticipate us continuing some minimal grants for the business district for the foreseeable future. Okay, and just in case anybody is really, really interested in all those grants, I have a 3-page strategy and discussion that I have created with all the detailed points. I'm more than glad to give you if you want one before you walk out, so I have one there. All right, quiet zone. First, something that's not a contract. Okay, everyone I've talked to, everybody in the city, everybody in administration agrees this is a project we're pursuing. I got to give some background though, because I've been flooded with emails, mysteriously the same email that looks like the same topics, the same points from many people. So it looks like it may be orchestrated, but I understand that the people that are sending to me are impacted directly because they're living in close proximity to the tracks. We have 3 independent railroads, okay? 3 different railroads, all have their own line, they all have their own corporations, they all have their own companies. There's 80+ trains a day. All right? Some of the people living near the tracks will probably argue there's more than that. Okay? This is a key. Somebody got a gun up here, you know what I'm talking about that. Where's the chief, please? You packing? All right. Anyway, we have extremely low vehicle traffic across our tracks and crossings going into the park. That's a critical component of this discussion.
Because you can't get into the park.
The low traffic actually is below the threshold that the federal government tells the railroads that they must improve their crossings and spend money on their crossings. If those traffic counts are high, like they are in Cherville and Griffith and Homewood Flossmoor and every other one of the communities that those emails told me about, okay? Cherville, whatever, did I mention it? When those traffic counts are high, the federal government has a regulation that says after they exceed a threshold, the railroads are mandated to invest in technology on those tracks that's called constant warning. All right? And what constant warning is, it's a $250,000 per crossing investment that actually is like artificial intelligence. When a train's coming at 80 miles an hour, the gates will go down much sooner because the train's coming faster. If the train's going at 5 miles an hour, they'll go down with 50 feet before the train hits the crossing. And the reason that's important is when you go to a quiet zone, we have to guard rail off or put the barriers in the road so people can't go around the crossing gates. Without that technology to let those gates go back up if that train stops, the crossing's blocked until the train moves again. But that technology is forced on the communities with high traffic counts, not on the communities, on the railroads with communities with high traffic count. In our case, there's no threshold for them to put it in, or no demand or mandate for them to put it in. Okay, we have taken the necessary steps all the way to the point of funding. Right? The next step is that we sign on a dotted line that the city of Whiting is going to commit $2.4 million to go to a quiet zone. Okay? We've taken it all the way to the steps. Some people may not understand the dollar amount. We've got the estimates. The railroads have come to town several times. They've presented their proposals to us. American Structure Point Engineering Company consultants are working on a project for us. They're handling it. It's $400,000 per crossing. And we have 117th and Front Street, 3 railroad tracks. It's $2.4 million. All right. There is a valid increased public concern. I've heard some stories that I tell you what, there's very valid concerns, let's leave it at that. The city council has without a doubt identified it as one of their top priorities. It all comes down to the funding, and if a funding plan is in place and it doesn't fall totally apart, that project will happen. But it's important to know that even after we sign on the dotted line and commit that money, it's going to take some time from that point to get that project finished. All right, I'm going to run through, wow, 7 o'clock already. All right, all right, so I'm going to run through some quick updates on other projects now, just so you give you a feel for it and kind of give some direction. You can look at some drawings. Lakefront project, the current phase of the project should be done by the end of September. Okay, that's the current phase, which is north of the road. In November, the NDOT phase will begin, and the NDOT phase basically does it connects the two entranceways into the park. 117th Street, Front Street, connects the trails, ties it into the boardwalk. It also does some beautification in the entrance, and also the beautification along the entranceways, and also redoes all the existing paths, or repaves all the existing paths in the park. The event structure, we have been calling it gazebo for years, because for lack of a better word, which will be right on the shoreline, and the formal garden. Design is currently underway. That should be completed by next year. All the finished landscaping probably starts early next year, goes through the summer, and probably by late summer, the entire project will be taken pretty good shape. The Walhalla parking improvements will also start next summer. The Dog Beach will probably start in 2014 and be finished by the end of next year. It may drag into 2015, depending on how much technical permitting we may need. Okay, for those of you who don't know, we're looking at, as you drive into the park on Front Street, the right-hand side, which we call BP Beach. The city acquired the first, several hundred feet of the shoreline from BP. There's a pile of rock out there now on the shoreline. That rock delineates our property line. Now we want everything this way. That'll become a beach area to where we'll turn into an area specifically for pets. The plan to take Walhalla lighting, which is